no danger to residents living around targeted nuclear sites. The nuclear authorities of 4 Gulf countries have also reported no unusual radiation levels. UAE's nuclear authority said U.S. attack on Iran's nuclear sites had no impact on the country. Saudi nuclear regulator also reported that no radioactive traces were detected in the environment of the kingdom or Arab Gulf states as a result of the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Kuwait's nuclear authority also affirmed that there was no increase in radioactive traces found in its airspace or waters. Meanwhile, Qatar said it is also monitoring the rise in radiation levels in the Gulf. And to discuss more, we were earlier joined by senior political scientist Rafael S. Cohen, and this is what he told us about the ongoing situation in West Asia.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think President Trump means what he says, in the sense that when he gave the speech to the American people, he basically laid out a choice for Iran. Either you accept negotiations over your nuclear program now and take an off-ramp, or if you choose to retaliate and double down, the United States will escalate in turn. And I think the fairly blatant threat here with, calling for regime change in Iran, I think that's part of the either you take the diplomatic off-ramp or something worse is going to happen, and that means going after leadership targets and trying to topple the Iranian regime. It's capable of doing so, at least in the military context. The Strait of Hormuz is quite narrow. Iran has plenty of fast speedboats, missiles that could go after sort of the slow lumbering oil tankers that provide a good chunk of the energy to the global market, by some estimates upwards of 20%. The question is, would they want to? And that goes into who gets that oil. And because it's primarily not the United States and not Israel that relies on the Strait of Hormuz for their oil. It's countries like China, India as well. And so that has a political motivation for Iran not to close it.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
A major flashpoint is unfolding in the Gulf. Iran is reportedly threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil shipping route, and this comes after U.S. bombed 3 of its key nuclear sites. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, and its narrowest, the maritime passage, is 33 kilometers wide, yet it handles roughly 21 million barrels of oil per day. That is about 21% of global oil trade. It also transports 1/3 of the world's liquefied natural gas. Even a partial closure can disrupt global supplies and send prices soaring. The strait is critical for energy exports from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, and others. Now for India, 2 million barrels of daily oil import pass through here. But India's Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Hardeep Singh Puri, has said that India has enough diversified sources to absorb the shock. Energy markets are already reacting, with analysts warning oil could jump to $80 per barrel.
The government under the Honorable Prime Minister has been consistently and periodically reviewing the situation, including the possibility of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Iran's threat economic suicide, warning Tehran against taking what he called another terrible mistake. Tensions are high, and the world is watching the Strait of Hormuz closely. Well, earlier we were joined by a security analyst and geostrategist, John Rossamondo from Washington, D.C. And this is what he told us about the ongoing developments in the Israel-Iran war.
I think that what President Trump is saying, in contrast with maybe the Bush and Obama administrations that used American military power to topple governments, that the United States military is not going to be used to end the rule of the mullahs in Tehran. You've had ongoing protests against the mullahs for the past almost 10 years. I could foresee things such as President Trump helping the Iranian people to remain connected to the internet so that they can take matters into their own hands, or maybe the Israelis taking out the besieged militias that murder and oppress the Iranian people when they rise up. So I think that President Trump is, saying that it's up to the Iranian people, but I could conceive some sort of covert operation or something like that. Well, let's put it this way. For the past several years, the people of Iran have been demonstrating in favor of restoring the monarchy. And Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has been the most important and most popular opposition figure. And he's been reportedly approached by China, America, and other nations about the possibility of forming a government in the event the regime falls.
Now, Iran has warned of retaliatory attacks on U.S. bases in West Asia, and this after U.S. attacked key Iranian nuclear sites, joining Israel in the biggest Western military action against the Islamic Republic since its 1979 revolution. Ali Akbar Velavati, senior advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said any country hosting U.S. forces involved in the strikes would be considered a legitimate target. Now, speaking with state-run IRNA, he said America has attacked the heart of the Islamic world and must await irreparable consequences. Now, according to the New York Times, American military and intelligence officials have detected signs of Iran-backed groups preparing to attack U.S. bases in Iraq and possibly Syria. The report quoted an official who said Iraqis are working to dissuade them from attacking. The U.S. has a number of military bases in Iraq, including 2 airfields, Al-Kharij and Ain al-Assad air bases. According to the White House, the U.S. maintains a presence at Ain al-Assad air base in western Anbar province, supporting Iraqi security forces and contributing to the NATO mission. Iranian missile strikes targeted the base in 2020 in retaliation for the U.S. killing Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Now, if we speak of the Erbil Air Base, it is situated in the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region of northern Iraq and serves as a hub for U.S. and coalition forces conducting training exercises and battle drills. Now, coming to Syria, America's Al-Tanf garrison is housed in the southern part of the country, near the borders of Iraq and Jordan. The Trump administration has warned Iran against any retaliation, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that it would be the worst mistake that Iran could ever make. In an exclusive with Fox News, Rubio claimed that U.S.'s goal in the region is not war, but warned that if they are attacked, they will respond with capabilities never seen before. Now, in a separate interview to CBS, Rubio reiterated Washington's determination to protect its personnel in the region. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department has issued a worldwide caution for Americans, saying the conflict in West Asia can put those traveling or living abroad at an increased security risk. The State Department Security Alert said that there's potential for demonstrations against U.S. citizens and interests abroad, advising Americans worldwide to exercise increased caution.
And daily life in Tehran seems largely unaffected after U.S. strikes on nuclear and military sites in Iran and as exchanges between Iran and Israel continue. Now, no disruption to electricity, water or basic services have been reported, and some residents have now returned to the city after fleeing last week. Iranians took to the streets of the capital city on Sunday to protest against the United States and Israel, demanding a crushing response. Well, this as United States struck 3 sites in Iran, inserting itself into Israel's efforts to destroy Iran's nuclear program.
America and Israel are countries that have been committing crimes for 100 years. We must respond to them in a way that will make Israel disappear. And 7 generations later, Americans will remember our response.
We must give them a very crushing response and continue to do so until the destruction of Israel and America.
Now, hours after U.S. strikes, Tehran launched more than 40 missiles towards Israel, injuring 23 people, destroying apartment buildings and homes in 3 cities across Israel. The Israeli military said it carried out strikes targeting the Imam Hussein Strategic Missile Command Center in Yazd and missile launchers in Ahvaz, Bushehr and Isfahan. In Jerusalem, the U.S. flag is projected on the walls. Several American flags can be seen on the wall next to Rafah Gate, the in-between Israeli flags.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
U.S. has joined the offensive against Iran with strikes on nuclear facilities. Now, Iran has vowed retaliation, while the international community are pushing to avert a wider conflagration in the region. Now, here are the latest developments. U.S. President Donald Trump has brought up the possibility of regime change in Iran. In a post on his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump wrote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?" Earlier, Vice President J.D. Vance had insisted that the U.S. was not at war with Iran, but with its nuclear program, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the U.S. was not looking for war in Iran.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here.
No, we're not at war with Iran, John. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program, and I think the president took decisive action to destroy that program last night.
The world is bracing for Iran's response to the U.S. attacks. Ali Akbar Velayati, an advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said that bases used by U.S. forces could be attacked in retaliation. He also added that any country in the region or elsewhere that is used by American forces to strike Iran will be considered a legitimate target for our armed forces. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian also vowed that the United States would receive a response to the attacks. The U.S. State Department has issued a worldwide caution for Americans, saying the conflict in West Asia could put those traveling or living abroad at increased risk. The State Department security alert said that there is the potential for demonstrations against U.S. citizens and interests abroad, advising U.S. citizens worldwide to exercise increased caution. Iran's parliament has reportedly approved the closing of the key Strait of Hormuz shipping lane. Now, Reuters reported that Iran's Supreme National Security Council will make the final decision on the move, which could hamstring global trade by shutting the narrow passage between Iran and Oman. Israel said that its fighter jets had struck dozens of targets across Iran on Sunday, including a long-range missile site in the center of the country. Now, the Israeli army said in a statement posted on Telegram that approximately 20 fighter jets conducted intelligence-based strikes using over 30 munitions on sites across Iran. The targets included missile storage and launch infrastructure, radar and satellite systems used for aerial intel, and a surface-to-air missile launcher near Tehran. And for more than this, we're being joined live by Derek Grossman from Santa Monica, California. He's a professor of political science and international relations at the University of Southern California. Thank you so much, Professor Grossman, for joining us on the broadcast.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Let me start by saying that now President Trump says that regime change in Iran may not be such a bad idea, even though his own top officials say that that's not the goal. Now, tactically speaking, how do you see this conflict evolving in the immediate future?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that President Trump today has moved the goalposts, right? Originally, the plan was to get rid of Iran's nuclear capabilities, but now he's leaving the door open very clearly for regime change. Let's not forget that just a few days ago, he said that he knew where the supreme leader was hiding and that he was safe for now. So that, I think, is something that is certainly on the table for the United States. In terms of the direction of the war, you know, I guess my concern from the start was that Trump wanted this to be a one-and-done type of strike. But the problem with that is that the rest of the world, to include, of course, Iran and Israel, they get a say, they get a vote in how this plays out. And so to think that this is just one and done and there's no further action needed by the U.S., I think is probably, premature and likely naive, especially given what you were just talking about at the top of our program, that, you know, Israel and Iran continue to trade strikes.
Right, Professor Grossman. Having said that, we know that a lot hinges on Iranian response at this juncture. And as of now, Iran has threatened to attack the U.S. bases in the region in retaliation for the American strikes on Iran. It has also threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, which is a point at a very strategic location. And now, how do you see this conflict evolving further, and how do you foresee Iran responding?
Well, for one thing, Israel over the last few months has really decimated Iran's terrorist proxy network. You can look, of course, at Hamas in Gaza, but also Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And to an extent, Israel plus the United States have weakened the Houthis in Yemen. The thing that I'm most focused on, beyond, you know, Iran using its ballistic and cruise missiles to hit targets with U.S. troops stationed at them, whether in Iraq or Bahrain or places like that, the thing I'm looking at most closely is Iran's ability to use Shia militia groups to attack those bases. And for that type of threat, you're looking at limited ground force activity between the U.S. and these Shia militias. I believe that the U.S. would be overwhelmingly victorious, but could also, take some casualties in the process. And so that is what I think Iran's best bet is in terms of a response, beyond, of course, using ballistic and cruise missiles and drones.
Right. And we're hearing two very different versions of what happened at Fordo, right? Now, Iran claims that there was no irreversible damage, while Trump has claimed that the US strikes have completely obliterated the nuclear facilities. Now, either way, how does this change the trajectory of Iran's nuclear program?
Yeah, well, there's still a lot that we don't know, right? Because, I mean, we're still within the first 48 hours of this operation having taken place. And typically, I can tell you from my time in the intelligence community for over a decade, typically a battle damage assessment, as it's known, a BDA, can take weeks, months, or maybe even longer, could even take a year or longer, although that's unlikely in this case. I think we're going to have a pretty good sense of the battle damage assessment within the coming days, out to maybe about a week. And a lot of this is going to be done through a combination of technical means and human means. And what I mean by that is, you know, for technical means, you have things like signals intelligence or SIGINT. And for satellite overhead, we have geospatial intelligence or GEOINT. These are ways of monitoring what the Iranians are saying about what happened at these nuclear sites, whether they're using their phones or email or text messages, and also looking from above through satellites to see what has actually changed in terms of the contours of the facilities there. We're already kind of seeing some of that play out. Some of it is out there on social media and elsewhere now. And then on the human side, you know, we're going to have spies on the ground, either the U.S. leading spies or the Israeli Mossad leading spies, to then, you know, try to pick up some of the other pieces of the puzzle to see if anyone will tell us what they think happened there, whether wittingly or unwittingly. And so the combination of all of those different intelligence collection activities are going to give us, I think, and the Israelis, a pretty comprehensive picture of the state of those facilities that were targeted.
Right, and meanwhile, we know that Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is now in Moscow seeking close consultation with President Putin. Now, and he's saying that Russia and Iran have common enemies and shared threats. Now, if that happens, the situation could become relatively more symmetrical, I'd like to say. And we know that that's the last thing that Trump wants right now. Now, how do you foresee this alliance coming to the fore?
Well, I mean, so Russia has its own is preoccupied with its own invasion of Ukraine. I think that this development between Israel and Iran, and now the U.S., Israel and Iran, is really sort of unwelcome in many ways, because Putin would much rather keep the focus on what he's trying to accomplish in Ukraine, which is, of course, the complete invasion and conquering of the territory of Ukraine and eliminating its sovereignty, right? So this is really kind of like a sideshow, I think, for Putin, although you could make the argument that with the U.S. being distracted now, potentially in a protracted war between Israel and Iran, that we might actually take our eye off the ball in terms of supporting the Ukrainian resistance against Russia. I think we can chew gum and walk. I don't think that that's too hard for us to do in terms of like simultaneously supporting the Ukrainian resistance and supporting the Israelis. What I do worry about, however, and this is more my area of focus in the Indo-Pacific, is that if China or North Korea were to try to take advantage of the moment, then, you know, fighting a not just two-front, but possibly a three or even four-front type of war, which I think most people would consider world war at that point, would be, I think, exceptionally difficult for Washington, or frankly for any country to handle.
Right, and now with U.S. involvement, it seems like the rules of the game have drastically changed. Now, but we also know that in response to the Trump administration strikes on Iran, anti-war demonstrations have launched protests across the United States, while lawmakers continue to question the legality of Trump's strikes. Now, there's also growing unease that Washington is being pulled into another war that serves Israeli interests more than its own. Now, could this move end up being a double-edged sword for Trump?
Well, I mean, there's some serious concerns about the constitutionality of what was done, the secrecy by which it was done, right? Apparently only Republican lawmakers were briefed about it ahead of time, not Democratic lawmakers, right? So there's, and then, you know, as I think you're alluding to, the mood in America is quite anti-war and frankly, anti-involvement in a lot of issues around the world. And so, yeah, there's kind of an interesting time in this country, but it's, you know, I think it's very premature for me to try to predict where this is going to go, right? Because in the past, you know, we have, when we've been worried about intervention, but we've intervened nonetheless, right? Typically, you see a kind of a slight bump in support in the popularity of whoever's in the White House, and then over time, you know, especially if the war becomes protracted, the support will diminish. I mean, we're seeing that play out right now with our support to Ukraine against Russia, for example, right? We saw that play out, of course, after 9/11 with our invasion of Afghanistan and overthrowing the Taliban. We also saw it with our invasion of Iraq in 2003 and overthrowing Saddam, right? In all those cases, U.S. support, you know, whether we wanted to be there or not, U.S. support was pretty strong, at least in the beginning. The problem is when things take time, we Americans tend to lose patience. And that is, I think, the greater sort of macro trend that Trump would have to worry about in the weeks and months to come.
Right. Now, having said that, of course, we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops from here. But for now, thank you so much, Professor Grossman, for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
Thanks. Take care.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
Operation Midnight Hammer, U.S. military's most tightly coordinated air mission in decades, launched precise missile strikes on Iran's hardened nuclear sites.
And using advanced stealth bombers and bunker-busting payloads, the operation was swift, silent, and strategic. Now here's how the mission unfolded.
In a stunning overnight maneuver, U.S. pulled off largest B-2 bomber strike on Iran with deception and fighter cover. Operation Midnight Hammer, a bold and precision strike targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Months in the making, the complex and high-risk mission involved over 125 aircraft and bombers deployed over the Pacific as a decoy. Before dawn broke in Iran, 8 KC-135 Stratotankers took off from Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma towards the Air Force Base in Missouri, the ultimate home to the deadly B-2 Spirit stealth bomber fleet. Just hours later, 7 B-2 stealth bombers were already airborne. The silent giants were flying undetected across thousands of miles in West Asia. But not all planes headed east. To deceive Iran's defenses, a segment of the bomber fleet flew into the Pacific, creating a decoy trail, known only to a handful of military planners in Washington, D.C. In a surprise assault, 7 B-2 bombers under strict radio silence entered Iranian airspace. The lead bomber fired first, launching 2 massive bunker-buster bombs towards the Fordo facility at 6:10 a.m. local time. Within minutes, the remaining bombers released their payloads. In total, 14 bunker busters struck Fordo and Natanz. Moreover, at least 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles fired at Isfahan nuclear site from U.S. naval assets offshore. The mission was accomplished in a matter of just 25 minutes. Each stealth bomber is equipped with a 30,000-pound bunker busters. It is designated to penetrate up to 200 feet of earth
or 60 feet of reinforced concrete. The only weapon that could have reached Fordo nuclear site that is buried deep in a mountainside. The US says the initial battle damage assessment indicated all three sites sustained severe damage, but it is too soon to say whether Iran still retains some nuclear capability.
I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
But Iran claims no significant damage at the nuclear sites. It has vowed to retaliate.
There is no red line that they have not crossed. And the last one, and the most dangerous one, was happened only last night, when they crossed a very big red line by attacking nuclear facilities. I don't know how much room is left for diplomacy. We are now calculating the damages.
US has sent out a larger message to Iran: seek peace or face greater force.
As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war. But let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word.
The ball is now in Iran's court. Escalate or de-escalate, it faces grim choices for now. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now from Operation Rising Lion to Operation Midnight Hammer, U.S. has entered the Israel-Iran war.
Now the world watches as uncertainty looms in West Asia. Let's take a look at how the war unfolded in the last 10 days.
מה זה, אלוהים ישמור.
We have not attacked anyone, nor will we ever accept any aggression against us. We will never surrender to the aggression of any party. This is the logic and spirit of the Iranian nation.
I'm giving them a period of time. We're going to see what that period of time is, but I'm giving them a period of time, and I would say 2 weeks would be the maximum. Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise.
From the beginning of the operation, I promised you that Iran's nuclear facilities would be destroyed one way or another. This promise has been fulfilled.
There is no red line that they have not crossed. And the last one, and the most dangerous one, was happened only last night, when they crossed a very big red line by attacking nuclear facilities. I don't know how much room is left for diplomacy. We are now calculating the damages.
Now, with the U.S. officially entering the Israel-Iran conflict, Tehran has dramatically upped the ante.
Now, in an unprecedented move, the IRGC has said that it employed the Khyber missile in the 20th round of the retaliatory strikes on Israel.
Now, the Khyber missile is the latest generation of the Khorramshahr family. It is the heaviest payload of Iran's ballistic missile fleet with a 1,500-kilogram warhead and has a range of up to 2,000 kilometers. Now, it is designed to strike strategic targets in depth without the need for complex launchers, making it a crucial element in any preemptive strike or retaliatory response.
Now, it was among the 30 missiles Iran launched at Israel in the latest salvo, targeting multiple sites in Israel, including Ben Gurion Airport, a biological research center, military logistics hubs, and command and control centers.
Earlier today, the Israeli military confirmed that 2 waves of missiles were detected as air raid sirens blared across Tel Aviv and explosions rocked Jerusalem.
The Israeli Health Ministry has said that 86 injured people arrived at hospitals due to the latest round of Iranian missile strikes as well.
Now, in response, Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes targeting military installations in western Iran, including the missile launchers used in the earlier attack. In a statement, the Israeli military said the Air Force carried out precision strikes, swiftly neutralizing the launch platform responsible for the attack on Israeli territory.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
A major flashpoint is unfolding in the Gulf.
Iran is reportedly threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that is a vital oil shipping route after the U.S. bombed 3 of its key nuclear sites.
Well, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman. At its narrowest, the maritime passage is just 33 kilometers wide, yet it handles roughly 21 million barrels of oil per day, or 21% of global oil trade. Now, it also transports 1/3 of the world's liquefied natural gas.
Now, even a partial closure can disrupt global supplies and send prices soaring. The strait is critical for energy exports from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, and others.
Now for India, 2 million barrels of daily oil import passes through here. But India's Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Hardeep Singh Puri, has said that India has enough diversified resources to absorb the shock. Energy markets are already reacting, with analysts warning that oil could jump to $80 a barrel.
The government under the Honorable Prime Minister has been consistently and periodically reviewing the situation, including the possibility of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz.
Now, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Iran's threat economic suicide, warning Tehran against taking what he called another terrible mistake. And tensions are high, and the world is watching the Strait of Hormuz closely.
And as we know, this is a major flashpoint in the unfolding conflict in the Gulf, where we have Iran, which is reportedly threatening to now close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, it's a major development as it's a vital oil shipping route. And this is after the U.S. bombed 3 of its key nuclear sites, which include Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz.
Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway, which is between Iran and Oman, and it is the narrowest. The maritime passage is just 33 kilometers wide, yet it handles roughly 21 million barrels of oil per day. Now, that is about 21% of global oil trade, and it also transports 1/3 of the world's liquefied natural gas.
Right, and it's important to note here that even a partial closure could disrupt global supplies and send prices soaring. The strait is critical for energy exports from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, and others.
Now, interestingly for India, the 2 million barrels of daily oil imports pass through here, but India's Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Hardeep Singh Puri, has stated that India has enough diversified sources to absorb the shock. And, well, somehow energy markets are still already reacting, with analysts who are warning oil can jump to $80 a barrel.
And that being said, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called Iran's threat an economic suicide, warning that Tehran, if it chooses to go in that direction, it could be taking what he called making another terrible mistake.
Now, for more on this, we're now being joined by John Rossomando, who is joining us live from Washington, D.C. He is a security analyst and a geostrategist. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Well, let's get into the story that we have been talking about just now. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called on China to encourage Iran not to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. He's also added that a move to close the strait would be a massive escalation that would merit a response from U.S. and others. I'm interested to know, who are these other parties that involved that Marco Rubio is talking about?
Well, you're talking about the countries like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, that border the Persian Gulf. If Iran were to shut off the Strait of Hormuz, it could also have a severe economic impact on China that is heavily dependent on Iranian oil for its economic vitality.
Right. So, and we know that while the White House insists that the attacks were not about regime change, Trump is openly questioning why regime change wouldn't be on the table. And he said in a social media post, and I'm quoting him here, that if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, then why wouldn't there be a regime change? Now, we know that the officials and his administration has already said that that is not the case. Now, how do you interpret these mixed signals that we're getting from the Trump administration at the given point?
I think that what President Trump is saying, in contrast with maybe the Bush and Obama administrations that used American military power to topple governments, that the United States military is not going to be used to end the rule of the mullahs in Tehran. You've had ongoing protests against the mullahs for the past almost 10 years. I could foresee things such as President Trump helping the Iranian people to remain connected to the internet so that they can take matters into their own hands, or maybe the Israelis taking out the besieged militias that murder and oppress the Iranian people when they rise up. So I think that President Trump is, saying that it's up to the Iranian people, but I could conceive some sort of covert operation or something like that.
Right, and that being said, I'm curious to know, if at all they toppled the regime, do we still guarantee that Iran, after the U.S. strikes, would not want to go back to developing its nuclear ambition? Will the new generation, perhaps the new government, would want to not want to go back to it?
Well, let's put it this way. For the past several years, the people of Iran have been demonstrating in favor of restoring the monarchy. And Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has been the most important and most popular opposition figure. And he's been reportedly approached by China, America, and other nations about the possibility of forming a government in the event the regime falls.
Right, so we know that Iran's foreign minister is in Moscow right now and is trying to seek what he calls a serious and closer consultation with Putin, now saying that Russia and Iran have common enemies and shared threats. Now, do you see this as a sign of a deepening strategic axis between Tehran and Moscow? And now, having said that, could this shift the balance of power in the region at all?
Well, let's put it this way. There's already a very deep, ingrained connection between Moscow and Tehran. I mean, in the Ukrainian war, the Iranian Shahed drones have been used by the Russians against the Ukrainians. I mean, you have basically an axis of Iran, Russia, and China all working together. That I don't see anything else, but I think that if the people of Iran are able to rise up and able to take down this regime, it would be a real blow to both Moscow and Beijing.
Right, and I also want to get to the U.S. strikes. Now, we've been talking to a lot of experts, and there's a really interesting point that some of the experts have picked up. They say that they might have damaged the facilities, but then they haven't damaged knowledge, which is something that even Iranian FM has talked about. The knowledge has not been damaged. There are scientists who still want to work for it. So do you think, how successful do you think these strikes have been, especially getting U.S. involved in the whole conflict? How successful do you think this has been?
Well, I think that President Trump wants to keep a small footprint for the United States in Iran. And the Israelis have been going after every Iranian scientist of any repute to keep them from working with this regime.
Right, and that being said, we also know that US's involvement has triggered a lot of unrest back home, where a lot of Washingtons are not convinced with Donald Trump's justification of being complicit in the Israeli war, which is serving more of Israel's interests than America's. And with 40,000 troops still in the region, there's a lot at stake. Now, how do you think, is Trump going to justify this claim? Or do you think he has already done it, perhaps, in a limited aspect in his address? Or are we going to see more details emerging in the military briefing that's going to happen very soon? What's your assessment there?
Well, let's put it this way. There are a lot of Americans who are scared about, it will be another Iraq, another Libya, another Syria. Americans don't really understand the outside world. They don't understand that Iranian intelligence and Iranian assets were why Iraq turned out the way it turned out. They don't also understand that there's a widespread move inside Iran against the regime. President Trump can justify this based on the fact that Iran has been the #1 antagonist of the United States since 1979. It's basically been in a state of war with us, and there's no doubt that if Iran had a nuclear weapon, it would engage in extortion against us and against our allies.
Right, and that being said, I also want to bring in the whole point of diplomacy. Apparently, according to the Iranian foreign minister, they say that there might not be a chance for diplomacy right now. Somehow, Trump is also positive for that. He thinks that after the U.S. strikes, he can actually force Iran to come back to the table. We also have European leaders like the UK, France, and Germany trying to put them back on the table. Do you think that's a possibility as of now?
Well, I think diplomacy is dead. I mean, diplomacy's been dead for a while. I mean, last month you had Iran telling Arab, leaders in the Gulf that they would not give up the enrichment program. That was President Trump's red line. And now that President Trump has struck, the Iranians are not interested in budging at all. They are talking about, maybe striking back at the U.S. somehow. That could possibly even include terror attacks on American soil.
But also, I really want to pick that up as well. You said that the red line was the uranium enrichment, but that was something that Iranians said, that we're not going to have nuclear weapons. That was the red line, and not uranium enrichment.
Well, let's put it this way. Why do you need to have centrifuges and uranium at 60% enrichment, 200 feet down? I mean, it's not like you need to have that for a civilian nuclear program. The only countries that have 60% or more enrichment are nuclear powers like the United States, India, France, Russia, or China.
And that being said, can there be any deal where there could be a deal which could limit uranium enrichment, or that deal is just done? Nobody really wants Iran to actually even develop uranium enrichment for civilian purposes, as they say.
Well, there's no reason to have civilian enrichment at this level. You don't need that for civilian or for electricity. You don't need that for civilian uses. The only reason that the IAEA said that you need this is for military purposes. And if anybody wants to argue with semantics,